What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Birdman. Basically, this album is called Priceless, and it came out in the fall of 2009. So Birdman was capitalizing on his 2000s decade success that he had had with albums like Fast Money, the stuff with Big Timers, and like Five Star Stunna and some of that type of stuff. But particularly, this album was on a high note just because Lil Wayne had just blown up because of the Carter 3 album. He was really ubiquitous around the late 2000s because of that. And then on top of that, they had found like a new sensation, Drake, who does show up on this album. So it was interesting. So it was interesting enough just because Birdman was kind of in the right place at the right time, and he didn't have to rely as much on Lil Wayne on this album. This is a pretty awesome album, I would definitely have to say. This is definitely a rave album that has a lot of quality about it. And Lil Wayne is not all over this project, and these songs are like classic and vintage team ups, just like their old days. But it just doesn't have the same. It doesn't need to. It basically doesn't need to have the same affinity that it had back in 2006, 2007, those type years, and even 2005. So it's just interesting that some new stuff on here, like some of the Young Money crews on here, like Gutta Gutta, T Pain's on here. Drake is on here a couple of times, and there's just some overall good assortments. And Lil Wayne is kind of in his auto tune Lil Wayne days, the sort of stuff that he was doing on like the Young Money album and like Dedication 3 and some of that type stuff. So it's just kind of, you get a good mixture. I mean, Lil Wayne doesn't take, I don't want to say Lil Wayne doesn't take his verses seriously on this project, but he is kind of more in like a relaxed kind of format compared to what he would be doing on like the Carter 4 and some of his standard albums. It's not like, I still think a relaxed Lil Wayne is a pretty potent combination, so I don't think it's like anything tapered, but it's just kind of where he has more auto tune affinity this time around and that type hook stuff. But Birdman has a number of singles on this album. The thing about this album is it was a pretty vast album. This really felt like it was poised to be Birdman's. Birdman has a number of singles on this album. It really felt like it was poised to be Birdman's biggest album in terms of how some of that kind of went. And I just would have to say there are some songs on here that are not on this album, or at least only on the deluxe edition. I thought about reviewing the deluxe edition, but I don't really have internet at this particular stage, so I'm not really able to do it. It would have been more work than it was worth. I will eventually, I think I'll probably return to this album just because there's more than 3 or 4 songs on the deluxe edition. So I wonder if Spotify even talks about it like that. But I do own the album with just the 13 songs. So that's the version I'm going to review. But there's a couple songs, there's a couple of singles on this album like Southside and Written on Her that are not on the standard edition. So Birdman had a pretty large promotion for this album. Some of these songs are remixes that show up on here, but some of these are just more alpine to that sort of concept. So it's just kind of good to kind of get that. But this, yeah, I would definitely say this is one of Birdman's biggest albums. This is one that was trying to hit the charts numerous times and kind of break Birdman out of being Lil Wayne's shotgun type fold as far as that kind of went, the second banana and that type of stuff. I mean, really, this is the last album. Really, the problem with it is this is like the last album that you get from Birdman on his old ways and his old affinities and that type of stuff. He did drop a couple. He did drop a couple of mixtapes in the early 2010s, which I've gotten to in some cases. But I kind of feel like, in terms of some of that, like the Birdman of 2009, 2007, 2005, is just not here as much as it used to be, and that's kind of really Lil Wayne and Birdman kind of went their separate ways. They don't team up as much as they did in the 2000s, which is kind of disappointing just because that concept was pretty strong. They were always like a good 1-2 punch, kind of like Shaq and Kobe and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and some of those type ones that just kind of had those good classic vintage kind of team ups as far as that kind of went. It was just kind of, it is somewhat of a disappointment just not being able to see, like, well, I mean, it's not a huge disappointment. It's just kind of something you might notice and be kind of miffed by just by the fact, oh, there's not Birdman albums. I mean, he's done some collaboration albums, so that's this kind of thing. So we'll talk about the singles here. The first single is always Strapped, and this is like a pretty standard bravado type beat. It's very much triumphant and marches along, has very kind of like militant kind of sounding beat. It's very much like a marching band or kind of something like that type tune. I just like the concept behind it. I mean, it's not a wholesome victory for me. It's kind of an almost song for me, but I still somewhat like this song. It's just a solid club tune. It just kind of has like club, like it has like club beat layerings in there as far as that kind of goes, but it is kind of more of like a sports game kind of feel as far as that kind of goes. Just more something for like a football, baseball game, something like that. Just typical night out as far as that sort of thing kind of goes. It's like a nice evening tune for kind of being at a sports game and just kind of appreciating the sights. I mean, The reason why it's an almost song is it just doesn't quite hit as hard. There's definitely some better beats on here like Hustle and Shinin' and Mo Millie and Nightclub, especially, and Money to Blow, that are just far better. But it's not going to detract from the score because I wound up liking most of the songs on this album. There's only like really one song out of these that I just didn't wholesomely enjoy. So that's really saying something. That's impressive for Birdman. I wasn't expecting, not to say that Birdman's a foul rapper, but he can craft albums. So I just wasn't expecting to like that many songs off this project. I just wonder how many I'm going to like off the deluxe. But so I'm going to kind of skip the Written on Her and Southside singles. I'll probably review them on the deluxe edition, but for now I'm just going to skip those just because I don't have them on the album I have, and my internet's kind of out right now, so that's just kind of the thing. But Money to Blow is the fourth single, and this is one that kind of has like a circus-like kind of beat on here. I just really like the kind of recreational and just kind of amusing, this kind of fun house type beat as far as that kind of goes. It's very much a festive fun house kind of beat, and it just kind of has like it's a knocking kind of club gem. I definitely like the feel of it, and it just has a great hook by Drake. This is just an easy kind of smash. This is where Drake really started to take through and shine and just be able to take flight and be able to nail some of these just quite easily. It just has a nice jive towards it. It's just probably one of Birdman's most distinct hits. When you think of Birdman from like the early 2000s, when you think of a song like What Happened to That Boy, or like the song with Lil Wayne, like Neck of the Woods, when you think of like a song by Birdman and Lil Wayne, like Neck of the Woods or Stunt Like My Daddy or some of those type ones, this is definitely one of Birdman's largest hits, and it's just an easy kind of highlight. This is probably the song that sold the copies of the album. This is like the biggest hit song on here. Birdman had a lot of songs, like the first three singles, Written on Her, Southside, and Always Strapped. They kind of charted decently on the charts, but they were kind of R&B and rap chart exclusive charts kind of highlights. That's this kind of thing. It's just a decently big album, bigger than Birdman normally gets. But the fifth single is For My Town Play Ball. The fifth single is For My Town Play Ball, and this is a pretty looming highlight. I definitely feel like this is a looming, larger club highlight. This makes a lot more noise about it, and this has like a nice, thunderous kind of energy that should get you ignited. Definitely has that kind of feel. This is another hook that Drake does. So Drake's actually on here like 3 times. I forgot that he was on this song kind of, but he helps out on this song, and it just really is effectual as far as how good Birdman and Drake songs kind of work. It's just a classic combination, just like Birdman and Lil Wayne. Birdman and Drake's pretty potent too. There's good concepts, just a very looming song, just a sprawling kind of like this really spreads out. This really has that kind of effectual, this kind of more dramatic kind of feeling about it. It's just an overall kind of hit. Definitely like the energy. It's not quite as hooky and commercial snap ready as Money to Blow, but it's definitely a great follow up to it in that same kind of context. I think For My Town is better than Always Strapped, and I would have to say I would say that Money to Blow is probably the biggest hit single out of the 5 singles, at least from what I know. I would have to say that For My Town is probably the second best in terms of the 3 songs that I've heard. So that's just kind of the thing. So out of 13 songs on here, I wound up liking 11 songs plus one almost song, which is Always Strapped Remix. So I already talked about liking Always Strapped the remix, so at least almost liking that one. So we'll talk about some of these. Really, the only song I didn't like on this album was just Money Machine. I'll briefly talk about that. I felt like this was kind of a pounding beat. I almost did wind up liking this song. I was going to write some about it just to say what I liked about it, but I didn't like the beat switch up in the second verse. It's kind of a short song. If there had been 3 verses on the song and the first 2 verses had been like the first verse, I probably would have liked this song more, but I just didn't like the switch up of how it went. It just went from like a pretty thumping, kind of raucous, rowdy kind of song to like a more tame and kind of quieter type tune that just didn't match the energy of what it needed to. So I didn't like that one. It's the only real song I didn't like. I didn't like the intro that much. That one just didn't really connect and spark off the energy that it needed to. But other than those 2 songs, that's really about it. So we'll talk about some of these. I feel like Nightclub's a pretty hit song. Obviously, this being for a nightclub, this is a suave kind of stepping out kind of gem. It's a very glittery and sauced out kind of beat on here. It's just an easy nightlife kind of hit. Definitely like this one. This has some real effectual kind of energy, and I really like the kind of chandelier-like keys on this song. And this is really kind of a fancy Blue Blood kind of tune as far as that kind of goes. This shows some finesse to Birdman as far as that kind of goes. Shinin' is a real nice one also. Shining's a little bit more down to earth or a little bit more ground level than Nightclub. I feel like this is just a very sparkly kind of dance club hit. Has an excellent hook by T-Pain on here. This is another good potent combination is Birdman and T-Pain. They should definitely do more songs. This is a good song that should get you pumped on Shining is a good song that should get you pumped. It's definitely got a good pace about it. And this is an overall kind of real paced kind of one. It's just a great song to get some drinks in your system and kind of jive and dance a little bit too. Definitely a song that can get the ladies jiving and that type of stuff. I would have to say it's just an overall good one. Mo Millie's another highlight. This has Drake and Bun B on here, so Bun B kind of quietly shows up on this song, which is pretty dope. This is just a sprawling kind of venue hit. This one's kind of a club song, but just not quite as emphatic of one. It just really feels a more like a night venue or just a place where you'd hear music or just have some food, that type of stuff. Just a little bit more appreciation of just sitting down and relaxing a bit. It's got a noisier sound and a more comfortable energy for good times. I feel like it's just a lazier song compared to songs like Shinin' and Nightclub. Not quite as much emphasis on like the recreation as much as it is just kind of, like appreciating the sights and just like relaxing a little bit more and being a little bit more comfortable. I just really like the vibe of Mo Millie. It's a good one. I mean, Birdman has some layered kind of stepping out and night venue kind of cuts on here. Definitely similar to folks like LMFAO and Blood on the Dance Floor that just have multiple night venue hits and just the understanding the taste of different variations of stepping out. Mo Millie is just a definite kind of comfortable one for doing that. I Want It All is a nice one. This is just kind of I Want It All is like a real nice quick highlight on here. This is a crunchy kind of synthy club highlight, just a fast highlight for going out and about. It's just an easy song to turn up to, and it's kind of a booming song. This is one of the more this is one of the more noisy kind of get fucked up pretty quickly type tunes. I would definitely say this competes with LMFAO and those type folks as far as that kind of goes. 303, some of those folks, that's just more electronic and EDM. This is definitely one that reminds me of Jeffree Star and some of that type vibe, so it's got a good vibe about it, good hook on here. There's some ones on here that Lil Wayne kind of does some hooks on here, like the title track Priceless, where some of these just really feel like alternative highlights, something you hear at a Hot Topic store or something like that. It's kind of that alternative gloss that some of that kind of has. So it's interesting that Birdman was even stepping into the alternative. It's interesting that Birdman was kind of stepping into the alternative fold as far as how some of that kind of goes. That's a good concept. Bringing It Back is kind of like a dreary kind of flashing lights kind of gem. It's just a nightclub kind of malaise. I definitely feel like this is definitely one. Some of these kind of have, I mean, with so many nightclub songs on here, this is kind of one with nightclub malaise where you're stepping out a bunch, where it might get somewhat boring when you think about when you're at the nightclub 5-6 days out the week. And this is kind of a song for that, where maybe you're bored of the club, maybe you're getting a little bit tired of stepping out and some of that, but you still like going, you still like appreciating the sights and congregating, some of that type of stuff. It just has a very dreary kind of feel towards it. It's just not quite as flashy and biting and as feisty as some of the other songs on here, like Shine In and Nightclub and Mo Millie and some of those type ones, are For My Town or Money to Blow, but it just kind of has like a more dreary and kind of swash kind of feel about it. Definitely for some flashing lights, just a standard night out, I would have to say it's just a good one. Real glittery and sparkly kind of beat. Hustle really reminds me of like a Young Money type tune. This is definitely a slithering kind of Young Money type tune on here. It's got a screeching type beat, and it just overall feels like a nice club hopper. This is another one. If you like the sound of like the We Are Young Money album with some of those type early 2010s type beats of like bedrock, but just in a more club oriented type sense and night venue type sense, this is a good one. Gutta Gutta does a great job on here, and Lil Wayne's on this song also. He drops a verse. So it's just an overall kind of Cash Money highlight just for some vintage Lil Wayne and Gutta Gutta type feels. It just feels like a mixtape cut almost, just with Birdman tacked on. It's pretty good to get that. Priceless, the title track, is another highlight. This is definitely a nice one. This is an ominous kind of pounding arena bop, so this is definitely one for like a larger type fair. It's an arena type song. It's like a rap version of like arena type song as far as that kind of goes. It's got some eventful energy about it, which means it's just a lot more busy sounding and a lot larger, just a lot more looming type feel, ominous type feel, and this is an overall evening gem. Lil Wayne really annihilates the hook on here. This is one where he does his auto-tune and alternative type hooks that I was telling you about earlier. He definitely nails this one. There's another one where he does it. There's another song where he kind of does it like that, and it might be Bring It Back or just one of these. He kind of will do some hooks on here, and it just really kind of goes well with that. He is kind of on like his Jeffree Star and kind of Blood on the Dance Floor type vibes as far as that kind of goes with this particular album. So auto-tune Lil Wayne is pretty dope. It's getting some of that. It's just very sleazy, dreary, and drenched, and just like kind of lean and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. So Been About Money's a nice one. Been About Money's like a sparkly, kind of optimistic money tunes. Definitely a good song for collecting some flow and that type of stuff. It's just an overall social cut. So that's another good vibe about it. It's just kind of a song about getting money that has a social type feel about it. So it's just a good one for kind of stepping out, but still having some money and not so much grubbiness, but this kind of hustle mentality kind of in mind. I mean, the thing about this album with Birdman is he has a lot of songs on here that talk about money, Money to Blow, Money Machine, Been About Money, Priceless, Hustle, Mo Millie. I mean, a lot of these have the money themed type feel about it. It's just kind of the concept where you would think that the palette of these songs is pretty plain and bland as far as that kind of goes, but Birdman makes it interesting. I think the concept of just the varietize, the beats are spectacular, and he just overall has a vibe of just kind of appetizing. He associates with the right people, and he has the right chemistry and character to be able to hoist these kind of songs, to be able to do it. So it's definitely good, despite the fact that you would think that the topic palette is not quite as large. I mean, the concept behind it is just different variations for nightclub life, and he definitely has like a pretty ardent feel of just the velocity of some of these night venue songs, and on top of that, just it being about money is just like a good catch as far as just kind of the flashiness and more social kind of like ins and outs of just stepping out, and that how that kind of goes. Definite weekend albums and easy highlights. That's kind of the concept here. That about talks about everything. I talked about the intro and the other song I didn't like, and I talked about everything on here, including the Almost song. So this album gets a 10 out of 10. The social score I'll give a 10 out of 10 also. I mean, I do want to eventually review the deluxe edition. We'll have to make a return visit to this project down the road, see what's up with it. But I would have to say this is a pretty good highlight, pretty much one of Birdman's best. I mean, this is a classic Cash Money album. This has some prime Lil Wayne on here. Drake is on here in his early hit days. He did several good hooks, just some overall good moments as far as that kind of goes. Just a very flashy and just pretty relevant to like the times. I mean, this is an album that lasted into the early 2010s. I just would have to say, I mean, really, Birdman didn't last that long into the early 2010s, but this album seemed like it carried over just because of the hits that were kind of on it. It's just too bad that he didn't translate as well, because he really Birdman just kind of feels like a product of the 2000s, but it's too bad the timing of this album, just because this is quite the hit, and it's just kind of, it just feels like he just didn't get the justice that he should have gotten on this particular project. But that's just kind of the thing. So as a result, he didn't drop his supposed fifth album, Bigger Than Life. It's too bad about that. But that's just kind of the thing. So me liking, I don't know if I talked about giving the social score a score yet, but I'll give the social score a 10 out of 10 just because it has so many flashy nightlife kind of styles. Definitely good emphasis of just the ins and outs. Very similar to like 303, Blood on the Dance Floor, LMFAO, Pitbull, Flo Rida, Tayo Cruz, some of those type folks that were popular around this time. It just has a really thrilling, it's actually surprising how easily Birdman kind of translated. I feel like in some cases, I feel like Birdman kind of one-upped Lil Wayne in terms of like the nightlife, just how easily he kind of weaved with this particular style. This is just a very litty and relevant and flashy kind of album that just was surprising on all cylinders. So it's definitely good. I just wonder how the deluxe edition would fare. In terms of the future, Birdman has not done much apart from some collaboration projects with Juvenile and NBA Youngboy. I'll have to check out some of those, but for now, this is definitely a good hit, and I do recommend it for just an easy kind of taste of like some highlighted nightlife.